Hello, everyone, and welcome to Family Talks with Leonny. And we are here with a good friend of mine, Dr. Peter Lillback. Thanks for your time.
Good to be with you, Leonny, and all who are listening today.
For this episode, I hope to talk about husband and wife relationships. Now, may I first ask, how long have you been married?
We were married in June of 1973, so I guess that's coming up to 47 years or something like that. I have two grown daughters, one married, one unmarried. My married daughter has three grandchildren for me, two girls and a boy.
Ah, that's right. When we talk about marriage, there's always this joke that people share. They say that during dating days, when a girlfriend sneezed or coughed, the boyfriend would say, "Oh, honey, are you feeling all right? Let me get you some medicine. I'll come over to your home right away." And then in the first year of marriage, when the wife coughed, the husband would say, "Oh, listen, darling, I don't like the sound of that cough. I will call the doctor and I'll make an appointment. You go and rest." And then after 5 years of marriage, and the husband would say, "You're still coughing? Haven't you taken any medicine?" And then after 20 years of marriage or 30 years of marriage, the husband would say, upon hearing the wife coughing or sneezing, "Seriously, woman, you should cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Are you trying to give me coronavirus?" So the decline of marriage over time seems funny to some, if told in a joke, but it's real in many relationships because they are used to being with each other. So what do you think?
Well, a couple things come to mind. I think Benjamin Franklin had an interesting saying. He said, before marriage, keep both eyes wide open. After marriage, keep one eye closed. In other words, we see each other and we begin to, is this a good relationship? And then we can become very picky and fault-finding. Another way to say it is familiarity breeds contempt. The more we know somebody, the more we see their flaws, the more we get used to them. And so that's part of the human nature that we have, that we can stop loving people, we can see their faults. And so when we hear that language of husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, Jesus doesn't say, "Well, you sinned again, I don't love you anymore." He continues to say, "I died for your sin, I love you. Now let's try to do what pleases the Lord." So we need to keep working to be committed to loving and caring for our spouses throughout life.
So the key is you have to keep working on the relationship instead of just being content. Because some people say, "Really, I don't really have any problems with my wife. Our relationship or marriage is okay." And then they stop working, I guess, on their marriage.
Well, I would put it this way, is that through life, realize there are new challenges that we have to deal with because no one can predict the future. That's why the marriage vow said for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, for wealth or poverty. We say those words in our marriage vows, and when hard times come, it's easy to be very discouraged. And so the key thing is to remember that love is self-denial at its very best. It's saying, I'm giving up myself for the good of another. When we really love somebody, we continue to say, it's not me that counts, it's this person who counts. And so every day we need to correct our attitude when we're dealing with our spouses or our families or other people we're close to, and say, am I putting myself first, or am I willing to set myself aside to do good to this person who's closest to me? And that is kind of like you're driving your car. You don't turn the wheel one time and say, I don't have to steer anymore. You constantly have to adjust. And so we have to respond to the new challenges, and we do it by saying, what do I need to give of myself to make a difference? Love is self-denial. Christ shows God's love. He so loved us that he gave his son. Jesus gave up his life willingly for us. We're to love our spouses, husbands or wives, like Christ loved the church. It's that, am I willing to still give myself for this one who's my bride? That should be an ongoing reality.
Now, people see you as professor. They always see you as teaching or preaching. But then if somebody asks, in what ways have you changed? The first day you were married, the young Peter Lillback, and today being married to close to 47 years. In what ways have you changed?
So the way I think I've changed through the years is that I knew very little about a female presence in my life. I had two brothers, a strong father, and my mom did her best to take care of all boys. So when I was married, I realized I didn't understand fully the way a woman looks at the world. Now, I had a girlfriend that I married, but living every day and seeing how they go through it. So part of what happened to me is I had to learn the difference of looking at the world from a feminine and a masculine perspective. It's very different. And so another thing I had to learn is that everybody speaks a different love language. There's a book called The Language of Love. And so some people do it by quality time, sometimes by talking, some by gifts, some by acts of service, by touching. And we need to speak the love language of the heart of our spouse. And it's really important early on we say, how does my wife know that I'm talking to her in the way that she likes to be spoken to? And it can be little things, it can be what we need to figure out, because it's no one is the same. So not only is there learning to work with a female presence as a man, what's the difference? Secondly, what is the uniqueness of this person I'm married to? They're not like me necessarily. They may be very different. So it's very obvious if you're going to marry someone from Indonesia and their heart language is Bahasa, and I speak English, I might say, man, I need to learn some Bahasa language to speak about issues. And when it comes to heart language, maybe we don't know about emotional language. So I had to learn more about that. What really matters to my spouse that's different from maybe somebody else I know. So the humility to say, I need to understand this person that's different than me on their terms, not on my terms. I think another thing that's important is through the years, as different challenges come, we realize that what was once important in the past is no longer important. In other words, you used to like this, well, maybe you don't like that anymore. Well, then adjusting with the unique needs. So I think at the end of the day, it's the humility to say, how do I not serve myself, but this one who I'm with in the best way that meets her needs, not mine. That's, I think, is an ongoing expression of love that adjusts through the years.
Some people expect, I guess, and when those expectations are not met, they feel not loved.
Yeah, that's the love language, and that's part of what I think when a couple begins their journey together, to find a way to say, how can we have a time where we love each other enough that we're saying, okay, I really need to tell you what's really on my heart. And we don't get mad. So I like to call it the James 1:19 time. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That every day there should be a time in our relationship where we stop and say, okay, what's on your mind? I'm listening. I'm being quick to listen. I'm not going to fight against you for saying, I'm going to say I'm here because I care about you. A couple that learns to communicate effectively like that early on and then practice it, they will learn to adjust to the needs that are there. And I think what happens is that we often don't learn how to communicate effectively.
That's the thing, because I think the key word that you used is communication.
Yep.
And today, these communication issues have arisen even more with the existence of gadgets.
I think the gadgets are different for different generations. So my generation, it's easy to come home and watch television and not talk. We just watch the show together. And maybe there's entertainment, but if it's always that, you lose the sight. You have to spend time where you actually focus on each other one-on-one. Then there's today the gadgets that we have like this. I'm told that the millennial generation speaks better through gadgets to one another. And if that's really true, then maybe you need to have a gadget time that's distinctively connected to the person who says, text me those messages so I can meditate on them. Maybe your one-on-one time is actually through a device where you say, we're going to record this and actually take it, but it's dedicated so we're focusing on each other. To me, the key thing is attention, giving your full focus. Because have you ever noticed you can listen at different levels? If you are getting ready to be parachuted behind enemy lines and your commander said, when you jump down, you got 3 minutes to get from this point to this point or they're going to be captured and killed. You're writing notes, you're thinking. But when your spouse comes to you, I've got a need, and say, I'm watching football. You're not listening. So I think every day that James 1:19 time or that one-on-one is I'm going to focus on you today. So you can't predict where a person will be in 10 years, but you know where they are today if you're listening to them each day. And so you gradually engage each other and learn to understand more fully. So focus, one-on-one time, James 1:19. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. and then self-denying. It's not about yourself. I think in that conversation time, it's best that a man starts off with his wife and say, you speak first. I want to hear from you. I think it was James Dobson who said that men are given about 10,000 words and they use them all at work. A woman needs about 100,000 words and she's waiting for her husband home to begin.
Yeah.
So the point is the communication needs are different. And a husband who loves his wife tries to provide for that opportunity. I often say a couple that can communicate will survive almost every major problem. If you can't communicate, those festering emotions, the heartaches, the hurts, they'll build up and they can cause great problems.
We've had cases where it seems all right, but that 15th year of marriage, the wife suddenly says, I want a divorce.
Yeah.
And they could be Christian couples because it's just been piling up. Or whenever the wife wants to speak, the husband says, you're making a big problem out of something that's so simple. Why should we talk about this?
There's a great line I heard from one of my older friends. He's gone to glory now. He said, when I'm with my wife, I remember this. If it's important to her, it's important to me. That's loving your wife in a way of denying yourself. It may not be important to me. It's important to her. Well, then that means I have to listen to it. I may not fully agree, but I need to understand it and try to stand with her. So communication expresses love. You're hearing, you're listening, you're not fighting over it, you're trying to understand, and where you can, you're trying to be supportive. And then if you have a good communication like that, there's the opportunity to say, well, then how do we do this together? I'm not sure I see it your way, but I want to care for you. And you try to find a way to show love and concern. And that's a process, that's a maturity. So the question way back, how have I changed? I think I've become much more humble, a better listener. I don't always have to be right. And I really am trying to say, am I really meeting a need that's authentic and denying myself for the good? So there's a famous saying in America too, a happy wife is a happy life. When you have a wife that's very miserable, you're not doing a good job. And sometimes we can't always solve all the problems, but we should at least have a heart out of love, as Christ taught us, to love as Christ loved the church. We should try to do that very much.
If there are men out there who say, I'm not somebody who is good in communication. I don't really know the right words. I speak or say the wrong things, and that makes my wife angry because I say the wrong things, and that's why I choose to be quiet.
Yeah.
So to those men, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, you don't have to say any words to be a good listener. You do have to be focused and say, I'm paying attention, I'm listening. Secondly, I think when you don't know what to say, you can always ask a good question and say, am I understanding that you mean this? If that's true, well, then what? In other words, a good listener can listen without giving comment just by asking questions that show, I care to hear more. I want to understand well. And I think that in a loving relationship, being heard and someone trying to understand you is very reassuring, and it builds a relationship of trust. If you don't know the right thing to say, I think in a relationship where you've learned to communicate, you can honestly say, I'm not wise enough to know what to say right now, but I want you to know I'm trying to understand. How about if I think about this for a while? And maybe tomorrow when we come back again, I'll try to think some more. And instead of coming back and say, this is what I think, you might say, well, this may not be the right thing, but what do you think about this? Or you've suggested something and you open it up, you're quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. I think those words really guide us very well in building a relationship that lasts. So humility, focus, willing to gradually learn together, and then really listening deeply and then trying to understand more fully. That really builds a strong relationship. This James 1:19 time I'm talking about, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, it needs to be mutual. I believe the man should start it. He begins by saying, I want to hear from you. And over time, there's a point where he needs to share what's on his heart. And that needs to be where a wife says, okay, I'm going to be quick to listen. I'm going to be slow to speak. I'm going to be slow to become angry. And I want to hear what the issues are, and I want to try to understand you. And that mutual give and take requires That just as a husband needs to make sure he's focusing, there's a better time in a woman's life for her to listen to her husband than another time. When you're trying to get the kids to bed, it may not be the best time to listen. Maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's night, but every couple needs to adjust their lives in such a way that you're willing to sit back and say, I'm really here to hear from you. I care. I want to understand. And keeping that communication alive is really important.
Those are great, great tips. And I really hope that those who are listening can start applying.
Yeah. One of the things that often happens with a man is that they'll say, you've already told me this. Why are you saying this to me again?
Yes.
And what we're doing is that's one of the ways we don't understand the difference between men and women. Men tend to communicate for information purposes. Women communicate for information, but they also communicate for emotional reasons. And if we don't understand that, we actually hurt the person we're with. So you already told me that, I don't need to hear it again. I need to say, oh, she's telling me this again. Why? It's apparently there's something deep. It means I need to listen. And maybe I should ask a question like, wow, this is really important to you. What are you really feeling about that? Tell me more. Instead of trying to shut them down and saying, I've heard it, you're trying to listen. And that probing and listening maybe will help to come to an issue that maybe is not even fully clear to either one of you. But in the process, if you're committed to each other in that communication, you'll come to the point of understanding, and that will strengthen your relationship. Remember, Jesus did not give up on us because we failed. Our marriage vows are like Jesus' vows to his church. So don't give up. Start again and get help if you need help. Get good habits. And sometimes it has to begin by saying, I'm really sorry. I haven't listened well. I've been too busy. Please help me to be a better relator to you because I do want to love you. That's hard, but with that kind of, again, humility, being able to make that commitment. So to those that are saying, I've had enough, I want out, that's not God's way. Now, there may be reasons where a marriage has to end. I'm not saying that is impossible from a Christian viewpoint, but it should not be quickly done, lightly done. It should be substantively done. Really work to preserve your marriage because divorce rarely solves our problems. They only add to them. They may relieve one thing, but there's new issues. So loving Christ means we'll love our spouses like Christ loved the church from a husband's vantage point. And I would urge each husband to work to preserve his marriage and begin, in light of all that we've said, by learning to become a much better listener and trying to pay attention, because that is a powerful way of loving someone.
And this is for all marriages out there that being married longer, they can glorify God together.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. It's getting rarer and rarer to see couples that make it 50 years. So we need to make that a standard, not an exception. So we really need to work in this area.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Dr.
thank you.
Lillback. To everyone who's listening, thanks again and follow Family Talks with Leonny. And don't forget to subscribe and share. Bye.
Bye-bye. Good to be with you.